24-hour race. Yes, that's right. Straight off the back of a slightly delayed 24 hours of Le Mans, we are ready to get going for the 24 hours of the Nürburgring, courtesy of the Radio Show Limited network of channels. You're joining RS1 or indeed RS3. My name is Johnny Palmer. We'll introduce the rest of the team in a moment or two, but this is a difficult race to have put together, quite clearly, logistically wise, to get everybody on site and safely has also been very, very tough. And we learned midweek that COVID-19 was discovered in amongst the Porsche ranks. So Porsche, the brand from Stuttgart, have had to pull 9 of their drivers out of the entry list. That's been a nightmare for all involved. Those that obviously weren't at Le Mans and therefore presumably aren't infected have had to rejig their driving lineup. Some, indeed, some cars will not even take the start. So for Thursday and Friday, covering qualifying 1, 2 and 3, and also top qualifying tomorrow, which is divided into 2 sessions, I think for the first time ever, certainly in recent memory. I'm delighted to say that I am joined by a man that has actually raced in this event a little while ago, but it was definitely there on your CV. You've also raced in the Spa 24 Hours and British GT, along with a historic Touring Car Championship, I think 2 of them. Peter Snowden, welcome. And I'm delighted to say that you've actually done some of the NLS races previously as well. Yes. I haven't, so your knowledge is going to be second to none there.
Well, done NLS races in terms of commentating with Bruce, yes, for radio show, yes, indeed, not actually partaking in one, but you mentioned 24 hours, and it was 20 years ago. Thank you, Johnny, for reminding me that.
Yes. I looked that up this morning, and
I wasn't a youngster then. So thanks for reminding me of that one.
Not at all.
I thought the mirror never lies and all that.
I thought I'd start as I mean to go on, you know. No, we're all very friendly here, and obviously you're well used to 4-hour and 1 6-hour race that the NLS have already done.
Correct.
This year. Now, NLS, Nürburgring 24 Hours, they always make it very obvious that they're not the same championship. It's organised by a completely different body. And the one thing we haven't had leading into this is the qualification race that normally dictates who's going to be in the all-important top qualifying tomorrow. So there's been quite a lot of kind of rejigging, but that's 2020, isn't it? That's just how we are right now.
I was going to say there's 2 threads there, isn't there? It's almost like politics. It's what they say and what they do is 2 totally different things. No, it isn't. They are separate organisations quite clearly, but I think you talk to anybody involved in teams, they see the VLN, don't call it that, NLS, as a precursor, certainly the 6-hour. I mean, KCMG very much. They even put out in their paraphernalia, their bulletins. That's exactly what it was. It was a build-up to the 24-hour. It is accepted internally. But as you said, John, it's so different this year. You won't be familiar with, won't have seen it just yet. The what Bruce and I happily refer to as the shopping mall. The way the pits work, where you go in and around, and the cars that haven't got enough steering lock to get in and have to stop. The Glickenhaus being one of them, for instance, it can't get in through Garage 1, has to stop, reverse and go out again. So that'll be interesting at night.
Yes,
just thinking about that, something to come look forward to. But they basically go in through Garage 1 and then go down what we call the shopping mall of the concrete divider and around back into the pit lane. So it's, I mean, great to the organisations of VLN that have done that, and from their organising point of view. Now we've got 24 hours of it. It's very different, you say. No qualifying race. Very, very different qualifying. But also people in grandstands on the Grand Prix circuit as well. We've got, which we were allowed in for the 6-hour race. That was the first one that permitted them. Not on the Nordschleife, sadly, so we can't see those flares and barbecues and things going around. And you say about doing that. One of the things I remember distinctly about doing this at this race 20 years ago was, as you went off out through the woods, the green hell. You're sitting in a racing car and you think you'd be busy, but you're amazed what you see going on around you and the smells. And you got to know where barbecues were.
Really?
And it was quite extra. It's one of those very surreal sort of sensory things of thinking, shouldn't I be concentrating on driving this car? And all of a sudden, I can smell burgers. I can smell sausages.
Could you work out what course they were on through the evening?
Absolutely.
That's a bit more salady.
So, yeah, I think they want ice cream now. I think most of it was beer, though, I have a feeling. But
well, I'm trying to think how long ago it was now, 3, 4, maybe 5 years ago. I have experienced the support race, the Young Timers race, from the inside of the Caracciolo carousel. And yes, the first tent that I and a few others from Radio Show Limited passed by, we were beckoned inside for a couple of Orsteiners. Never met this guy before, but he says, I have beer, welcome. So brilliant. I mean, that is this unfortunately what we're going to miss this year. But as you say, a limited amount of crowd tickets are available on the Grand Prix track, and so far everyone seems to be sensibly socially distancing within the grandstand. We are go, and the other thing I should point out is that there's no free practice this year. The schedule very much condensed into 3 separate qualifying sessions. This is going to be 90 minutes, obviously held in the daylight because it's 12:30 local time. Later on tonight, 3 hours worth of pretty much night qualifying so that everyone can get used to where those barbecues are, or rather aren't. And, you know, there'll be 1 or 2 that have never experienced the Nordschleife in the dark, so plenty of opportunity. I say plenty, 3 hours goes incredibly quickly, particularly if you're sharing with 3 other drivers. To get your reference points, this place changes an awful lot from the daytime into the evening. I make it 23 different classes this year as well. SP9 separated into Pro and Pro-Ams, depending on what your driver makeup is. That's not a difference in the specification of the cars, purely if you've got bronzes and silvers involved. There are some TCR cars as well, including the Hyundai i30N from the Hyundai Works team. They've got a Veloster and an i30 this year. Harry Propchek in amongst the driving lineup for the 830 machine, but TCR is a category that has taken off worldwide and is very much present on the grid. The one thing that's disappointing, and I understand the reason for this, is that I think we're actually going to struggle to make 3 figures in terms of the entry this year. I've got 99 on my entry list currently. It would be great to throw in a few extra ones before we get going on Saturday, 3:30 start local time. But I mean, I don't know whether this race has ever run with a 2-digit entry field. Can you remember how many were in it in the year 2000?
I can actually, quite extraordinary. I think, I'm going to say that, I think it was 262.
Wow.
It was, I know it was well over the 250 mark, which I just found unbelievable.
Yeah.
And, as we talked about it, they even had reserves, and it was such a long formation lap, as you know, around the North Side, 25 kilometres, that what they do was they let the cars out of the pit lane onto the Grand Prix circuit, the new circuit as we call it, because it was even newer 20 years ago. And basically, you would start that lap, some cars would start that lap, not knowing whether they were going to actually take part in the 24-hour or not. And when they got towards that, the corner where they turn left and go onto that,
yeah,
the Nordschleife, or not, a marshal would dictate at that point, via the radio being told, somebody's parked or somebody's done it, or even maybe it's just even worse, crashed it on an out lap or something, or formation lap. But the reserve order, basically the higher up the reserve order you were, the better chance you got, and you arrived at it, and they basically went that way or go home, back to the pits. And imagine all that build-up, everything that goes into. We know the logistics, we know the effort to get into running a car for a 24-hour race, to only drive the Grand Prix circuit and be told, sorry, you're not in, go back into the pits, or the opposite, the elation of arriving, going, we're in.
That is a complete, I mean, talk about extremes of motorsport. You know, you haven't even started the race by that point.
Exactly the point.
Are you going to be in or not?
Roller emotion. You haven't even started the race. That's just the one. Do we take part? Do we not? Do you get in the zone? Do you not? And it's it's quite extraordinary. But it is, as you said, Johnny, it is something totally different to this circuit. Venue, meeting, the whole thing, it is quite extraordinary, and that's just an example. That's from 20 years ago.
Yeah.
As you say, sadly, not so many cars this year.
Well, that brings us quite nicely into the format for qualifying, because when you get to the end of the Grand Prix lap here at the Nürburgring, towards Hyundai Corner, as it's called this weekend, you've got you've basically got 3 choices. You can either stay well left and head out onto the Nordschleife to the Hatzenbach and 25 kilometers worth of racetrack. You can sit in the middle, and that allows you to negotiate the hairpin at the end of the Grand Prix track and then feed back into the Grand Prix circuit without going to the pits, and it's all carefully coned out. Or you can stay well right and head into the pit lane. What you currently can't do is head down the Dottinger Höhe through Tiergarten and head straight for the pits. You've got to do a full lap of the Grand Prix circuit before you can then gain access to the pits, and there are cones all the way down the start-finish line. So that's again something from a logistical point of view that the teams all need to be aware of. You probably find that a lot of them early on in this session just do a handful of laps around the Grand Prix circuit, make sure the car is roughly in the sweet spot, and then they will make a plunge onto the Hatzenbach. That's exactly what the 830 Hyundai N30 has done. It is Manuel Lau at the wheel of that, by the way. So he's entered into the TCR category, as is the Veloster. Both types of cars. Well, the Veloster is run in the United States as part of the IMSA, not the main championship, but the Michelin Challenge. Forget the official name of that now. Pilot Challenge. Thank you, Tim Gray, our executive producer here in the main broadcast centre. So you're listening to RS1. This is the Radio Show Limited network of channels. Johnny Palmer and Peter Snowden taking you through the opening exchanges, and very much so the opening exchanges of qualifying one. These cars will have an awful lot of time to effectively get some practice in. By the way, these three sessions do not guarantee you a place in top qualifying, though, because that's kind of already been dictated by the races we've already had. Confusingly, not by the results, but more so from the average sector times that cars have already displayed. Looks like we may have had an incident a little while ago, potentially between the 830 and the number 7 Audi R8. Was there contact there?
Yes, because look, he's thinking he's going, the TCR car, the Hyundai's thinking it's going on a different part of the circuit, and I'm amazed that Audi's got all its anti-dive planes on the front still, because that was as close as you want to be. And I can imagine the pit crew and the team managers going, it's the opening laps.
Yeah.
We've got a whole day of racing yet. Come on, boys. Yeah, there'll be conversations about that afterwards, I'm sure.
There needs to be a little...
Probably won't involve tea and biscuits.
There needs to be a little bit of give and take, I would say, at this stage of the day. That was the number 7 car collection Audi of Milan Doncha. You recognise that surname. Milan is the younger brother of Indy Doncha. Miro Konopka, who was racing at Le Mans, not this year, but last, with ARC Bratislava. Got Patrick Niederhauser in that car, and Mike David Ortman as well. But it is a combination of one bronze and a couple of silvers. Niederhauser is the gold, so entered into the Pro-Am category. I just wonder whether that car is on Dunlop tyres as well. I always associate Audis to be on Michelins, but the other thing I always struggle with is what tyres each of the cars are on, because whereas Le Mans last weekend, it was essentially a whole load of Michelin-shod cars with 1 or 2 Goodyears. Actually, the Goodyears in LMP2 did very well. 2 of them finished on the podium. Sadly, they didn't win the race, but 2nd and 3rd for Jota and for Panis Racing, who got into 3rd position pretty late on after real difficulties for G-Drive Racing, their TDS car, you might remember, with Jean-Eric Verne at the wheel, a suspension failure. And the other dramas as well up ahead of Panis Racing meant that Julien Canal and the rest of his squad scored a podium. Oh, so important for Julien Canal, being a resident of Le Mans. But yeah, we've got an awful lot more tyre manufacturers on show this weekend. Michelin and Dunlop certainly. Toyo tyres represented not only on the grid but also in entry names. Novell Racing with Toyo tyre by Ring Racing have brought a Toyota Supra to the ring this weekend, and also GT tyres. But Yokohama, I'm sure, are present, along with 1 or 2 others as well. Normally, it's a fun game to head around the paddock at the Nürburgring to tick off something like 11 or 12 different tyre suppliers. And I'm going to be interested to see, actually, how the pit stops are done. I'm fully aware that NLS have occupied or utilised this system of driving partially through the paddock. Space at a huge premium, though, this weekend. So I'm not sure whether we are going to be using that system. I mean, from a COVID-19 perspective, it seems to be the order of the weekend. But with this being a round of the World TCR Championship as well, I think there's 3 races this weekend, quite possibly. Also, the Formula 4s as well, seeing the young hot shoes come through the single-seater world. So it is a busy weekend, and paddock space at a real premium. Kleiner Carousel already for one of the KCMG Porsches, and the KCMG lineup has changed a lot as well this season, this weekend I should say. The team from Hong Kong, because again Porsche have not been able to bring their full quota of works drivers with them after an outbreak of coronavirus at Le Mans within the Porsche ranks. So I will give you a recap of how we're looking from KCMG in a moment or two. Yeah, confirmation now coming through that not only have we always had more than 100 starters with the 24, but never had fewer than 100 finishers in the modern era. That's i.e. I'm trying to think of a way of doing the sort of AD Peter Snowden, because we're talking, we're talking past the year 2000.
I could see the wheels turning there.
They were
since
virtually ground to a halt, the wheels in my head.
Since millennium, and I was like, yes, so the race I did was the first race of the millennium. So
yeah.
thank you for that, mate. Yeah,
no problem. ADPS, I'm going to call it.
Oh.
Yeah.
I think you can get a cream for that.
Probably so. Yeah, so I mean, it's always been a huge amount of cars and a real shame. But as I said, you know, we've got to take into account the current climate, and I'm sure we would be well north of 100 were it not for this horrible disease which has affected the whole of the world. More paddock space available, indeed, but we're still not using the Mercedes arena because, well, that would ruin things like race distances and numbers of laps completed and whatnot. But this will be the first time with no qualification race that this version of the track has been in operation, quite possibly all year, because the NLS events have all been on the shorter Grand Prix track where you do use the Mercedes arena and then get partially along that short straight before taking a very awkward banked right-hander. So one or two cars again deciding to just exercise their cars on the Grand Prix track. No option to come off the Dottinger Her and straight into the pit. You've got to do a full lap. Car collection not showing any visible damage on the front left corner, despite that incredibly close call with Manuel Lauk at the first turn. So yeah, you're right about dive plane still being intact, thankfully, on the front left corner, Peter.
I bet that would have got his attention there. That would have, in some ways, having got away with it, and that's probably the key to it, having got away with it, it's probably set the bar for his mindset for the weekend of you just have to be careful. Something can change in a matter of seconds in these endurance races as well, we know, let alone 24 hours. And it's not over until Sunday afternoon, and here we are talking on Thursday morning. And it's that's the whole point. Car at the top, talking of Audis, the first car at the top is Frank Stippler in the Phoenix Racing R8, an 8:18 for sort of indicative time. For a moment there, it's dropped down the order a little bit just because of the way they went out onto the grid first. But we had the Hyundai Veloster in there, up at there, about 5th or 6th. I know it's academic, but for them it'll look great.
Oh, no,
take a snapshot of that and sort of send it to your mum. So look where we are amongst the Lamborghinis and the Audis, etc. We know it's going to drop down the order. It is now already down to, but it's in the top 10. In fact, two of them, the 130 and the Veloster, both in the top 10 at the moment. Yeah, which is quite nice to see.
Absolutely. So the
interesting mix at the front there, Johnny. Audi, Porsche, Audi, Lamborghini.
We should talk about
three Porsches in a row.
We should talk about the lineup in the number 1 car. They've got the number 1 because they were the winners last year, Phoenix Racing. Normally they would be appearing on the entry, I think it's number 4 or 6, in and around the 5. There is the 5 Phoenix Racing Audi. Anyway, they have changed their lineup, but only very slightly, because Frank Stippler, Frederik Vervies, Dries Vanthoor, all in the winning quartet last year. However, take out Pierre Caffer, who does appear elsewhere in the entry list, we'll talk about him in due course, and insert the current DTM Championship leader in 2020, a certain Nico Muller of Switzerland. So there's no strength in depth lost there for me. Arguably, possibly, gets even stronger. 28 years old, Nico Muller, platinum-rated driver, and really excited to see how he gets on. Cool wrap for that car as well. It's sort of aquamarine colour for the number 1 machine. Not seen that on a Phoenix car before. But yes, the Porsches, sadly, there are 1 or 2 through the entry, but what we're not going to see is the car that had thought it had won last year until about a week after the race when, yeah, the 911 Porsche had won on the road, and then I remember reading the press 7, 8 days later to say, no, there'd been a change of result, and actually Phoenix Racing had inherited it effectively.
So it's a long delay, that 7 or 8 days, isn't it? I mean,
time.
we had I think it was round 3 of the NLS, the Octane Ferrari won on the road.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, then I was removed within the hour because of a most extraordinary reason. Incorrect compound on the left rear tyre. And it was one of those things quite simply where the manufacturer had failed to communicate to the authorities that it should be on the list. The team thought it was on the list and therefore used it and ran it, got to the end, and then it's taken away simply because, quite simply, an administrative error.
Yeah.
How galling is that? It wasn't illegal. There was no performance gain other than within the rules. That wasn't the problem. It wasn't nothing exceptional. But imagine all that effort of. And unfortunately, because I kept saying to Bruce that car was on for this win, and he was like, I'm not sure. And we went through it, and I did the told you so type thing, as we would, and I'm sure we'll do some of that over the weekend,
of course,
and some of our colleagues. And the moment the announcement came out, I just got a text from Bruce saying. Yeah, all right. Point proven. That car, of course, in the field again today, and in the 6 hour that we did just a few weeks ago with John Hindhoff and myself. That car again, a stunning performance all the way through. But it was those two Audi Sport cars at the end. The Ferrari had to do fuel saving. The Swiss team were on 2 octane there. Bit of fuel saving on that car, and he had to slow down. And we saw sector times dropping by 20 seconds, not just a lap time, sector times, and it was very clear. And they basically had to fuel save that car to stay on the podium and let the Audis come through. And we've got one car already between. Somebody's a little bit of an off there. We're just going to look at it's
a Cayman, isn't it?
It's one of the Caymans from the category. We'll have just check on its number there. It is car number 75.
Yeah.
And not quite sure where he's managed to go off, but not too bad. I think it looks like it's just been a bit of a grass-cutting excursion by the look of it.
Well, that's one of the
Johnny?
SP10 cars, which is a GT4 and therefore runs to the kind of world spec of GT4. We've got one or two other GT4s in other categories, i.e. SP8 and 8T, depending on whether they're turbocharged or not. But yes, that is not the ideal start to the day. I'm also drawn to the amount of leaves on the track as well. One thing that John Gore said about the Astons last weekend is that the Aston Martin GTE car has a huge mouth on the front, like a big scoop. And he said the one thing we've never had to deal with before at Le Mans, because it's not that time of year, is the leaf fall from the trees. And they were in full, obviously, fall at Le Mans. And he said during every pit stop, we had to employ a guy who would actually scoop out these brown leaves because of the risk of overheating the engine.
Of course, because it's in June normally, so suddenly in September. It hasn't been running in September since 1968.
1968,
yeah, so and of course, talking of big-mouthed GT cars, take a look at our AMGs, Mercedes.
Even bigger these days.
Exactly. If ever there was a I'm here, I'm in your face, this is me. And we commented this, Bruce and John and I commented this on some of the previous LS rounds of exactly that car sitting behind you. It must be so intimidating, bearing down. It's like something out of Harry Potter, isn't it, almost?
Yeah. Sitting
there behind you, almost a cauldron bubbling. You've got this Mercedes there, and it's if that doesn't scare you out of the way, I don't know what does.
That's true. And that's the first time I've heard of Mercedes 2020 spec being compared to Voldemort. But I like the comparison. I mean, you would hate to have one of those.
I said it was going to be a long weekend.
No, very good. Grunting literally into your rear view mirror there as you negotiate some of these really technical parts of the circuit. But yes, the 2020 Evo sort of body kit, and there's a few other extra bits on that Mercedes as well, have brought it on, and it looks even more menacing. The usual suspects as far as Mercedes are concerned. HRT are here, Black Falcon are here as well. And HRT actually represented in the Auto Arena entry, the number 6 for Patrick Assenheimer's team and the rest of his crew. And cars 2 and 4 to look out for, with a certain Hjalmar Berman in the number 2, Adam Christodoulou, Mauro Engel in the number 4. Along with Lucas Stoltz and Manuel Metzger. That looks like a very threatening lineup indeed. Tricky to pick who's going to come out on top. I'm going to say really between Audi and Mercedes, although BMW are desperate for a good N24 this year. They've had to wait since 2010 for their last victory, and they came perilously close. I think it was last year, possibly the year before, when their M6 looked very strong, but they all dropped away eventually. Audi, the most recent winner, Mercedes 2016, the last time they took victory.
Yeah, it's a bit of a mystery with the BMWs, those M6s of Rover Racing and Valkenhorst. Absolutely stormed it at the beginning of NLS this year, almost unbeatable, to the point of HRT helped racing with the Mercedes. Yes, they were there, but then they had to disqualify in the first round. The Ferrari came on a little bit, but it was always about trying to beat the BMWs.
Yeah.
They seem to be the car to have. And then that seems to have faded away, and it's not really sure why. I don't suppose there's any. It's not quite like the world of Formula One, where they bring massive error updates every weekend, and the car this weekend is different spec, etc., etc. So I don't think we're quite in those realms in the SP9 category, or any of it for that matter. Obviously, there's a bit more control further down the field, but it's. I hate to use the word flatter to deceive, but it was BMWs and who could threaten them earlier on in the beginning of the first 2 or 3 rounds, and that's kind of changed now, and they don't seem to. What was interesting in those first 2 rounds as well was that the particularly the KCMG Porsches, they didn't do so well in the dry until it got damp.
Okay.
And then those Porsches really came to the fore, and we're just seeing now that just looking at the time sheet, which I know is fairly academic, but it's a bit of a pointer for us, Johnny.
No, carry on.
We've still got that Phoenix Racing car at the front, and then we've got 3 Porsches 911 GT3s in the background, 2 KCMG cars, and then the Falcon Motorsports on 2, 3, and 4. So they're laying the marker down, and this part of the qualifying, we've got a whole weekend of this. We've got a 24-hour race. We did Le Mans last weekend, so you're in the groove already. You never really got out of it. Came home Wednesday, had a bath, and came here again.
Straight out again,
exactly. Yeah. So it's long. It seems odd to be talking about these things now, but there's a lot of psychology for these drivers and the teams of putting it there. It may not count. It may not take you through to Superpole, Hyperpole, whatever it may be, shootout, all the different terms we've used over the years. But there's still that bragging rights of, we're there at the top, we're there, or thereabouts, and it does set the order. And we've seen it done in the past. Even teams that haven't got as high qualifying positions as they like, but more race day morning, they do something a bit naughty, a bit tweaky on morning warm-up. And it's totally psychological, and it's gamesmanship. It's getting inside the other person's head to the point where the team down the pit lane goes, what have they done different?
Yeah.
And the point is, they're there thinking about you, not about them, and it's all about distracting that. And it's hilarious. We'll see this unfold over the weekend, and I know somebody who's an absolute master at spotting all that is our colleague Joe Bradley, who'll be joining us for the race, because he loves all that kind of psycho stuff and whatever. So
yes, he will. So you got me and Peter for today and tomorrow. Joe Bradley, Nick Damon, and Alex Brundle will be the supporting cast. No, I'm being cruel. We're all on a level. So we'll have 5 different voices throughout the course.
You've said it.
That's true. It's there on the archive forevermore.
Can't be unheard.
So I think that's talk about the various lineups that these teams have turned up with. That's a decent commentator rotation that we're going to go for.
Yes, it's going to be lively. Good to see Alex Brundle as a former class winner in the 24 hours, isn't he?
Yes, he is. Last year.
Yeah, last year
for Aston Martin.
Yeah.
He's an ELMS race winner from this year. Led the race last weekend at Le Mans too. And former LMP3 champion, so credentials almost as good as yours, Peter.
way different way. He's on a whole different level. You're very.
developments. Remember, Falcon these days, they used to run a Porsche and a BMW to demonstrate how good the Falcon tyre was on many different, or 2 different chassis. 2 Porsches, though, this season. I think they've run that way all the way through the year. And in the 33, it'll be Christian Engelhardt, Sven Muller, Klaus Bachler in both cars, and Dirk Werner. And then in the 44, Bachler, Muller, Dumbreck and Ragginger. And I have to say, the 33 car wasn't wasting too much time there in getting through some back-marking traffic, some slower-going traffic from the other classes, Peter.
Well, and this is the thing that we see time and time again in this. We know it in endurance racing. We saw it at Le Mans last weekend, but it's a totally different sort of circuit in here. And we haven't got even to the night bit, of course. And lots of Le Mans is illuminated in bits of it, whereas here it's not. You're out through the woods, very different, much like Spa. You've got your pit complex illuminated, and then all of a sudden you disappear into the woods. Of course, we're not a million miles away from Spa. We're, what, 60 k's away, something like that? It's something like that. So it's a similar part of the world. Difficult is the back markers, and if you come up there, 2 back markers, it's not even a proper full counting qualifying session. It's a really go and get your way around the circuit and a bit of track time and a bit of experience if anybody needs it. But the Falcon car there, the Sven Muller number 8 car, having to sit behind 2 of the BMWs from the Cup class for 3 or 4 corners. And he came up behind. I saw them. The 2 were battling one another. And as soon as the brake lights came on, he's got to slow down. He's got to sit there. And you think, okay, through the corner, it'll be done. And they didn't. They carried on their own battle. And they get so immersed in that. And they've got every right to do that. And it is the rule and the etiquette of the racetrack. It's always the faster car's responsibility to get around the slower car. But that's when you get frustration. That's when it starts to become an issue. And you can't have that in a race. And this is just the first track action of the weekend, Johnny. And we're already seeing it.
It's already getting pretty close for comfort. And, I mean, all the GT3 cars, whether you're in Pro or Pro-Am, you were already into qualifying tomorrow night. So, it's a question about how hard you actually push. Yes, you want to be out there for good race pace, and you want to, at some stage, set the car up for a good qualifying lap as well. But it is a question about how much you risk, because, as you say, for the GT3 cars, this counts for absolutely nothing as far as in what order they will start on the grid for Saturday. So, yeah, presented by 2 BMWs. They look like the 3 Series cars, 325i machines. Where do you go? I mean, they are literally door handle to door handle. Is it the job of one to give way to the other? Not really, because you're out there trying to get good times yourself. And these guys actually are qualifying for their position on the grid. That's the whole important thing.
So in some ways, it's really down to the GT3 or the SP9 Porsche there to actually back out it, because they are qualifying. It's not so important to him, but it's that age-old thing we so often say. You cannot teach or train a racing driver to drive slowly.
No.
You don't want to. It's not in the instinct. And almost sometimes if you did, you'd be like, well, why? But equally, it's that balance of why would you get caught up in something that minor to you?
Yeah,
it's important to the BMWs because they're qualifying, as you've said, but to you it's kind of irrelevant. But you've got to get in, and that's where the top drivers, we've seen it the way they think. We look at the people that are at the front there, the Timo Bernhard and those sorts of guys up at the front. That's when they go, actually, it doesn't matter. But it takes something to do that, because you're out on track and there's a reason they became racing drivers, and it wasn't to drive Porsches slowly around the Nordschleife.
No, quite the opposite. Just caught a glimpse a moment or 2 ago. Yeah, that's the engine you can hear briefly in the background of Fred Vervies. So this is the number 1 car, which is actually a much darker green than I had been led to believe from the publicity shots. Entered as Audi Sport Team Phoenix. There are 3 Phoenix Racing entries this year, but that looks incredibly strong. Fred Vervies, the older of the 2 Belgians in that car. He is gold graded, joined by Frank Stippler, Dries Vanthoor, who's the other Belgian in that car, and Nico Muller, the man from Thun in Switzerland. And they run on Michelin tyres. Really smart livery, that, with a little bit of red detailing here and there, but it's principally dark green. And a real departure from what I'm used to from Phoenix Racing.
It's quite a retro sort of colour scheme.
Yeah.
It's almost sort of 1950s, 60s Grand Prix team colours. It's quite retro. That's dare I say, haulage colours, so lorries on the road. It's a bit Eddie Stobart, isn't it? We probably shouldn't say that.
It's not far off that. Slightly lighter green for Eddie, but no, I see where you're coming from.
We're digressing too early, aren't we? We're getting to lorries already. Yeah. Well, it's a very fast lorry.
The sort of mileage they're going to be doing through Saturday and Sunday is equivalent to an articulated lorry on a standard shift. So that number 1 car now turning through the Yokohama S, as it is called. I can't sort of cease to be surprised by how tight that corner is, particularly when you've got 3 separate grids thundering their way down to that scene at 3:30 on Saturday afternoon. Let's hope they all get through. V4 BMW still very much side by side. That was the rolling roadblock that the number 33 Falcon Motorsport Porsche had to encounter a little while ago. And let's mention very briefly the young Frenchman who tops the times, Jules Gounon, again in a Phoenix Racing car. He was racing at Le Mans last weekend as well. This is a full pro entry for Kim Louis Schramm, Michele Beretta, again someone in action at Le Mans last weekend, and a certain Frank Stippler, who is in both cars, the number 1 and the number 5. Promises to be a pretty busy weekend for the German, therefore. So Gounon tops the times by almost a clear 3 seconds over Timo Bernhardt and Fred Vervisch. So that is Audi from Bernhardt in his Audi for KCMG, and then the number 1 Fred Vervisch driven car. 21 is the, I'm right in saying, the Lamborghini Huracan. Yes, it is, of Conrad Motorsport, Franz Conrad, the Austrian, although the team now based in Germany, and Michele Di Martino, Marco Mappelli, Frank Pereira, and Axel Jeffries is the familiar lineup in that sort of turquoise and black Huracan. The only Lambo, sadly, on the grid. But sounds a lot like the Audis as they go by, because it's pretty much the same power plant, the normally aspirated 5.2 litre V10 that powers all of these 4 ringed cars too. Busy again for a blue and black Mercedes that is trying to sneak through early on in the lap. They're heading just beyond Flugplatz. And now, as they head towards Schwedenkreuz, the opportunity for that thundering GT3 car to nip by. But you've sometimes got to be so patient, especially early on after the Hatzenbach.
Are you saying earlier about those AMG Mercedes and the looks of them and the sort of the Voldemort look, but also it's the sound of them? So they've got, I mean, they've got a real deep bass sound. There is something quite extraordinary about the Mercedes, and it does really make the ground shake there. The BMW indicating out of the way, very kind of there to let him through, which is very, very courteous. I think that kind of proves our point, doesn't it? You've got that coming up in your mirrors. That I'll just put the indicator on and keep it away. It's also, I think, the first recorded incident of an indicator working on a BMW.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Write it down in your diary, folks.
Exactly. Timestamp that one. It explodes that myth quite early on, at least. It does work. Gounon at the top. When I think of Gounon, I think, of course, Mr. Jean-Marc Gounon. Well, it's very
it's his dad.
Yeah, exactly. That's you're showing my age. You're doing it
Sorry.
again. So I look at it and think, Gounon, he's going well still. Then I realise.
Well, what about Mr. Delatraz at Le Mans last year? Did you have the same feeling?
Yes. Yeah, raced against him as well.
Okay.
Yes, a long time ago. And Mr. Dumas as well, when he was they won the 2003 Spa 24 Hour in a Porsche, which was the NGT class, and they shouldn't have won it. And it was Ortelli, Dumas, and I'm going to have to look up who the third driver was now. 2003, somebody's going to tell us straight away, aren't they? And it was from the NGT category, and it rained 20 out of 24 hours on a biblical sense.
Wow.
And an NGT car, and won it, and they won it. I think it was car number 50 or 51. How sad is that?
These things just stick in your mind, though, don't they? You don't have to learn them. They just...
Yeah, when you're beaten by a car from a lower category, it told you everything about how they ran.
It hurts even now,
I think it was a Freisinger run car, I think it was.
Okay.
I'm going to have to look it up now, aren't I?
By all means.
Before somebody corrects us.
By all means. By the way, you can totally get involved with our broadcasts here on RS1, part of the Radio Show Limited network of channels. This is qualifying 1 for the Nürburgring 24 Hours. A very special year for the race, don't forget, celebrating its 50th anniversary. I had to count back then, but yes, the first ever race was 1970, so 50 years of the Nürburgring 24 Hours. This is the 48th edition, after 3 of them in the past did not take place for various reasons. But thankfully, well, touch wood here, COVID-19 is not one of those reasons why the race will not take place in 2020. And the NGT winner that you were trying to...
Spa 2003.
Yeah.
I've got Stefano Ortelli and Romain Dumas. How could I overlook Mark Lee in that
How
car
could
as
you?
well. Yeah, it was car number 15. It was Freisinger Motorsport though. So my apologies to Mark Lee and all his supporters for omitting him from the driver lineup, but they did win it back in 2003 in that rain, beating a BMS Scuderia Ferrari 550 to second place, would you believe? Again, no less a lineup than Fabrizio Godin, Capillari, Calderoli and Lillian Briner, the Swiss lady that drove their car in those days.
Yeah.
I remember that one well, but it was. I remember the point being that it was. It just goes to show exactly what we're talking about. A 24-hour race. It rains, conditions change, something can happen, and a car from a category you wouldn't expect can suddenly pull a surprise.
I'm not sure whether you've seen a forecast for this weekend, but it's not.
I wasn't going to talk about it just yet. I thought we were going to save that till sort of maybe this evening. I don't know.
Or maybe till Sunday, Sunday afternoon.
On the table straight away, Johnny.
No. Well, the thing is, actually, a moment or two ago, there was some more contact. This time for the Franz Motorsport, not Franz Motorsport, the Conrad Motorsport, mixing his first name with his second name there, Lamborghini and a Porsche.
Fricadelli Porsche.
Yeah, not sure whether that was a 30 or the 31.
30.
Okay, so that's the Pro-Am entry. And 2 into 1 wouldn't go there on the second part of the run into the hats and back, essentially. That was the second left-hander, I reckon, after the section of track that heads over the road bridge.
Yeah, Klaus Abelin at the wheel of the Fricadelli Porsche, and just as you say, just basically got taken out. I think it was just one of the things that the gap that Lambert thought was there wasn't there, and so be it.
Marco Mappelli trying to sneak up the inside to gain track position on the important hats and back.
Marco Mappelli.
It's not, agreed.
But
and whether it was a slightly confusing moment that he thought Klaus was leaving the door open and at the very last minute came across the nose, but it tends to be always the fault of the car behind. Whether that's going to be investigated, we'll have to wait and see. Race Control have many more angles of view than we do.
Well, the insurance testers can talk about it, can't they? And they'll sort it out between them.
They will.
Put a claim in, or
indeed so.
However it works.
The colours of Lant Motorsport represented on the grid, which is something I hadn't realised. Early entry lists just list a whole load of Audis as entries from the Audi Sport team, but that's definitely the green and white of Lant. And number 29 is the car I'm talking about for Mattia Drudi, Chris Meese, Rene Rast, former DTM or current DTM champion, I suppose we can say, reigning, and Kelvin van der Linde, the older of the two van der Linde brothers. So they're choosing not to go onto the long track, instead swoop through the tyre bales and back onto the Grand Prix track. So 3 different choices you can make at the end of the Grand Prix lap. Either to go onto the Nordschleife. Your B option is to do another lap of the Grand Prix circuit, or C, go into the pits. I wasn't aware there was a smart car entered class for this year. That's not out on track. Instead, some of the circuit crew, I think, making their way around the venue and using the little cut through that is in use during the NLS rounds. Thankfully not today, though.
It's still quite alarming seeing how just the other side of the barriers that is the track action, and somebody's going, marshals in the orange overalls going the opposite way in a smart car, thinking that's not smart, Johnny.
It's not smart. No.
That's it. I won't do any more jokes like that. That's as good as I get.
Presumably they got permission to do that. Making their way back to the paddock. Looking up at the Mercedes Arena grandstand as well. 1 or 2 people in there. That's normally flooded with fans, particularly on the Saturday afternoon ahead of the race start. Not going to be the same this year, of course, but I'm pleased to see that it is open and welcoming those that have got tickets for it. Tickets becoming available pretty late in the piece this year, in the last week or so, for those that want to experience this race from the Grand Prix track, but sadly nobody permitted into the Nordschleife campsites for 2020. The number 2 car is the one that was being a little delayed in amongst traffic, which is one of a handful of entries from Mercedes-AMG Team HRT. Hubert Haupt and Jelmer Berman, who are regularly in a car together, joined by Nico Bastian and Philip Ellis, the German-born Brit. So that will be one that we will be focusing on, I'm sure. Jelmer Berman is at the wheel currently and wondering whether to thread the eye of the needle there just before the run out onto the hats and back. Let's hope Manuel Lauch has seen him in the Hyundai. He did. And possibly the GT3 car, the safer way to do it is around the outside of that left-hander onto the hats and back. That's maybe where Marco Mappelli went wrong.
Very good point, because it's your own fault then, isn't it? All you're going to do is run out of road. You're not going to collect somebody else, so you go around the long way. But it is quite brave, as you say.
Yeah.
Fantastic livery on that number 2 Mercedes as well. I'm trying to get there must be a theme to that, as to something to it. And I'd love to know what it is now. Now, one of the M6 is going very slowly. Is that going to be an issue? Almost looking like they're restarting. That's a number 17. Martin Tomczyk.
It's a 42, actually.
We just saw the clip. They were basically the lights went off and on, which almost to me almost like an old control reset, restarted the whole thing to power off, power back on again. But he seems to have picked up pace again. So that's not what you want on your sort of outlap of your first track action of a 4-day weekend, of a 24-hour weekend, is it? And I imagine that feeling would just be, your heart sinks when it cuts. And reset it, and it all seems okay now. We will keep an eye on that. Let's say that's the number 42 car, one of our M6s in the field. That's the Team Schnitzer car. Martin Tomczyk at the wheel of that car at the moment, also piloted by no less than Augusto Farfus, Jens Klingman and Sheldon van der Linde. So again, a pretty average lineup in that car.
Yeah, I can't see any.
They've just found some drivers for the Nürburgring, haven't
pretty
they? Really?
Much. I can't see anybody who's going to light at the timing screen there come the race. Interestingly, that's the first car on the list for top qualifying 2 tomorrow. There are 13 cars already into the second bit of the shootout, effectively, and 42 is there as the first car. So I think they must have earned that probably from NLS 1, and as I say, it's not from results, it's from lap or sector times, actually. So if that car has shown incredibly good average times through the race, then you are in to top qualifying. But do you remember that car going well in NLS 1?
It did absolutely, and that proves it's right that car has come straight back into the pits, by the way, Johnny. So there possibly was an issue there. That's straight in now, so they're going to get that up, have a look at it, see what's going on with that. Yeah, it's kind of a bit like Indy qualifying, isn't it? It's not really where you finish the race. You might have won it last year, so it's what pace you can set that month of May. It's like the thing about the Nürburgring, because it is such an extraordinary circuit. And let's not lose sight of this. It's 170 corners. Just think that in one lap. 170 corners in one lap. It's obviously BMW's moment now, because the Rover racing car into the pits as well. Number 99 car. And you almost got to stop and think about that, because we take it as read, because we do this all the time. We think Le Mans 24 hours, and you talk to people outside of our industry and you say, what do you mean the car what's a 24-hour race, or when do you rest? And they don't. The drivers do. You have a rotation of drivers, mechanics don't, and the car has to go all the way through. And it's this idea of race a car for a day, literally twice around the clock, away you go, here we go. And it's 170 corners on one lap. We're talking 8-minute laps here.
Yeah.
Whereas normally, and this is what we were saying, John and I were saying this last time at the 6-hour round with NLS 5. It has such an effect on strategy and people and what you do, fuel strategy, vital in endurance racing. But 1 lap extra, almost anywhere else in the world, is 1.5 to 2 minutes as a rule of thumb, yeah? Here, with an in and out, that's 10 minutes.
Yeah. And another 16 miles that you've committed to, effectively.
And that's a lot of fuel. And race cars tend to use quite a bit of fuel because they're quite thirsty. So, running that 1 extra lap, normally you're allowed a little bit. You've got a little bit of room with that gamble. Here, one lap extra can be absolutely critical as to whether it actually completes that lap or not.
Yeah.
And fuel weighs. That's always a problem. That's what, and engineers want the car to weigh nothing. Hence, you get thin, skinny racing drivers, 6 stone wringing wet in overalls. That's what you need, because you don't want any weight in the car. So there's all these things, and this will come out loads more during the race, obviously. But it's all the strategies, and of course, then you've got strategists watching what the other teams are doing and trying to second guess what they're doing, and are they setting out a ringer or doing something to divert them? So many threads, so many aspects, Johnny, and I'm scared of peaking early, because we're only an hour into our 4 days of commentary.
Yeah, still got 45 minutes of this session to go, and always it's about 5 minutes longer than that anyway, because the session allows anybody that's just started a lap to complete it. So you're talking well, another 8 minutes, as Peter makes the point, bolted onto the end. The difference, and we'll get to this in detail, but the difference with this race from the NLS events is that when the checkered flag comes out at the end of 24 hours, it just comes out. They don't wait for the leader. That is it. So everybody is locked into the positions, and if you have just crossed the line as the race leader with the guy second place behind and the checkered flag falls between you, you win by a lap, and it's pretty much cemented in like that. Whereas with NLS, you wait for the race leader at the time to come around, so it can be 4 hours, 4 minutes, 5 minutes, 6 minutes, but that doesn't happen in this race. But we can delve into that in due course. The other thing that's active this weekend is the very quick motorcycle chicane, rather than the one that you may well be used to from Grand Prix of old and the DTM races here as well, where it's a much harder stop and a proper 90-degree left and right. It is a high-speed chicane in use this weekend, and the cones that tell you where the apex is tend not to last too long for the first couple of laps.
I'm amazed they're still there, to be honest.
I know, they're doing well.
I know most sort of touring car and GT drivers that I know of would get those shifted and gone straight away. There's certainly, certainly the likes of Bradley Ellis and stuff in their day.
Yes.
They'd have those out the way straight away.
He pulls no punches, certainly.
No, he doesn't. No, on or off the track, to be honest. That's another story. For maybe in the night.
Always been very neat and tidy as a safety car driver, though, I will say about Brad.
Totally professional. Yeah.
And no surprise that he's regularly the BTCC safety car driver. I don't know who he is these days. Might still be Brad from time to time, or the doctor's car.
Scott Stringfellow.
Scott Stringfellow's a safety car, yes, you're right. And I think Brad often in the doctor's car.
Otherwise Bill Coombs quite often from Thruxton was also
great driver.
Yes. The man that if you ever want to talk about his low of a career, was driving historic Tyrrell at the British Grand Prix support race, and his owner decided for the first time ever he was going to get involved in the strategy of the car and work out the fuel loads, and Bill disagreed with him, and he was leading, and Bill's probably listening to this, I'm probably going to get a message for reminding me, thank you, Bill. He was leading the British Grand Prix historic Formula One support race.
No.
If ever there's a race to win, you haven't won the British Grand Prix, but you are at that event, and it ran out on the last lap.
That is
now how do you start that conversation with the owner that's taken that decision, but equally provides the car for you?
Rather him than me, I have to say. That's very tricky.
Yeah.
So every time you see Bill, you make sure he doesn't forget that, do you?
Absolutely. He does exactly the same.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
As long as you both know where you stand.
Yes, I think they call it banter. But sometimes outsiders might not get it, and it's quite different in motorsport. I think that's what you do. You pick out the bit that's going to wind somebody up and focus on it.
Christian Krognes has won the 24 Hours of Spa before, but never, I think I'm right in saying, the Nürburgring. So that's one to tick off for Valkenhorst Motorsport this year. And Christian, a really impressive driver, just keeps getting better and better from Norway. He's 30 years old now, and joined by David Pittard, Mikkel Jensen. Mikkel Jensen, who was in an LMP2 last weekend and very nearly came away with a podium, were it not for Jean-Eric Vergne's suspension failure at Indianapolis, of all places. Thankfully, Jean-Eric Vergne did get the car stopped in time short of the tyre wall, but Mikkel Jensen could have got himself a podium in his first LMP2 entry. That wasn't to be. And they are joined by young South African driver Jordan Pepper in the Valkenhorst Motorsport BMW. They are also confirmed for the second bit of top qualifying tomorrow. As I said, there are 13 cars already in. 42 Schnitzer BMW, one of them, along with both, actually, Valkenhorst Motorsport BMWs, the 100 and the 101, and the 98 and the 99. So that's testament to how good the M6 has been this year, how quick the M6 has been this year. 5 of them already into top qualifying. And
particularly David Pittard, we've referred to him as the little terrier. And he seems to do, he did opening stints of NLS quite a bit. And we were, Bruce and I were commenting that he was taking risks that you would expect to be from a qualifying lap in the opening stint and getting away with it. So such is his ability and confidence in that car. He's able to do it. And really, and then again, quite often a closing stint. And in fact, they won one round. So it's quite impressive. Just we were saying about Marco Mappelli had that little connection with the number 30 Porsche earlier on. Well, at the moment, he's just popped the Conrad Motorsport Lamborghini Huracan onto the top of the timesheets as it is at the moment. So it's been an all-German display with that Audi, with that Lamborghini somewhere in the mix there, but that's now at the top of the timesheets. They've gone from down to an 811.
Okay.
Bear in mind that Gunon, which is in second place, the Phoenix Audi, was on an 815. So it's quite a chunk out.
It is.
And there, it's all relative. I'm not going to get too excited about it, but it is happening on the time scheme in front of us. Marco Mappelli in the pits with the Lamborghini now, so he's done his lap. Currently, we're looking at Lamborghini, Audi, Mercedes, Porsche, Audi, Mercedes. Quite a mix up there at the front. Conrad Motorsport, Phoenix, Team HRT, KCMG, and amongst the mix, Audi Sport Team, languishing, Viviche almost. I'm going to say languishing in fifth for the moment. It is somewhat academic because we say it's not. And it's a 24-hour race as well. It doesn't really matter. I've often wondered actually from a point of view of driving, all this pressure and emphasis on qualifying well, and whatever. It's not really about the time as long as you're not way off the pace because it's a 24-hour race. The biggest advantage I always thought as a driver being at the pointy end of the grid of a long race was you're clear of all the traffic. You can get out there, and the further the less you've got to deal with cars in front of you. If you're midfield or further down, once you get to sort of 10th, 15th, and we know only too well, what have we got turn one here at Germany? We've seen it all season long in NLS. Some people have got away with it, some people haven't. We've already seen one bit where the anti-dive planes we thought would be flying up in the air in carbon only just got away with it. I think it would have needed a feeler gauge to get between those two, because that was as close as you could probably get. But it's not just academic. Pole position doesn't really matter.
No.
But it does psychologically, and it does for clear track ahead of you.
And obviously it does if you want it, because then you can write all the headlines. Audi, Mercedes, BMW, and Porsche can say we were pole position at the Nürburgring. But I know what you're saying. Everybody forgets by the end of the race, Sunday afternoon, who was on pole position. And it is literally for bragging rights, it would seem. Friday night into Saturday.
It's done, isn't it? It's forgotten. But at this point today, we haven't got that far. Say we've got some 37 minutes of this first session of track activity to go still. It is a Lamborghini, the Conrad Motorsport car, at the top of the timesheets. Currently was pedalled by Marco Mappelli. It's currently in the pits. Gunon is on the provisional front row, as it were, in the Jules Gunon in the Phoenix Racing Audi R8. Some nearly 4 seconds adrift, actually, in times. As I said, it was quite a big jump that for the Mappelli. I'm sure times will come down. I would predict, I wouldn't be at all surprised if we get into qualifyings of well under the 8.10s, probably at 8.8s, I'd have thought. We might get down to. We'll see.
Year's pole.
I'm going to risk it now, and I've said it now. No.
Very good.
Johnny's now writing that down. That this time I said that, and he's going to come back.
You have taken into account.
He's actually going to do it now. He really is going to write it down now. He's going to hold it back at me. I've got highlighters in my bag, so if you need to just go on this point, you said.
You have taken into account the longer track we're on, haven't you, as well, this weekend?
Yeah.
Good. That's all right.
I'm just looking relevant to the 8.11 there. I'm keeping it real time.
8:10.9 was last year's pole position time. Now I'm trying to rack my brains to work out what weather conditions we had. It was late in the day. That session was sort of 5:30, 6 o'clock, I think. And they were only given 2 laps each, bear in mind. So, but then a clear track out front.
And what month was that? And that would be in. That was August?
May.
Okay.
No, it wasn't. It was. It was a week after. It was a week after Le Mans. So it was June. It was late June.
Okay. Late June. It's always the week after Le Mans. I'm going to say. Going on, I know he's got his pen poised. It's like being at the bookies. This is. Going to get my odds. Here we go. I'm going to say an 8.08 for qualifying. There you go.
A high 8.08.
Yes, the top half of it.
All right.
An 808.5 or above.
Or north of that.
Or north of that, indeed. There you go. So I can hear John Hindhaugh, Bruce Jones, Joe Bradley, all giggling hysterically in the background at the. He's just said what?
An 8.08. The fastest lap in the race was done by the 911 car that eventually actually was taken out of the result for engine irregularities, but they managed an 8:17.7 during the race last year. But bear in mind, you know, you've got 150 odd cars out as well. That was probably done in the middle of the night, I would guess, when conditions were near enough perfect. Thinking about it, the fastest lap tends to be done very early on in the race where you haven't got any traffic.
Absolutely.
So yeah, more likely to have been on lap 1 or not 1, but 2 or 3 perhaps, before they catch the tail enders. I'll dig that bit of information out in due course. The 119 car is one of the 2 Toyota Altises, I think I'm right in saying. This is the team from Thailand, and 119 is joined by the 120 machine. So yeah, Toyota Corolla Altises for the Toyota Gazoo Racing. So basically the same establishment. Oh, spin on the Grand Prix track for the Mustang.
It's a Mustang, yeah. The zebra liveried Mustang, and it's I'm thinking I think that might be an engine failure because that is smoking, and I think it's possibly spun on its own oil. That's number 67 Mustang GT of Oliver Sprungman. It's facing the wrong way, and there's an awful lot of smoke billowing out from the engine bay, the front-engined Mustang there, and there's even evidence of stuff on the track. I suspect that car has lunched itself and potentially spun on its own oil. Indeed, he is getting out. Sprungman's getting out of that car, and that may not be taking much part. I would suggest possibly not today.
No,
we've got a big gap.
I think you're probably right.
5:30 before we're on again today.
Yes. Check that time, but that's one of the 3 alternatively fueled cars, so they don't pit in the same area as everybody else in the pit lane. They turn right and into a little bay where LPG, I think, is available, and various other bits and bobs as well. But that's not the first time we've seen that Ford Mustang in the race, certainly. Right in front of the Lant Motorsport Audi. As the Audi was exiting the Dunlop hairpin, the Mustang was having its own moment, the OVR Racing Cologne entry. And yeah, absolutely no contact, power down. And I think you're right, fluids underneath the rear wheels has pitched it into a spin. It's gone right through 180 degrees. It's later on in the lap, isn't it? Or is that the Dunlop hairpin? No, it's towards the bit curve, I think. And the run after that awkward S's. Anyway, driver is out, and that car needing to be recovered. So there'll be yellow flags certainly out on that part of the circuit. Oliver Sprungman at the wheel of that car when it happened. So yeah,
well,
don't be surprised.
Sprung a surprise on him there, because I think I caught him out by there. From what little bit we've just been indicated to us, that it appears that as he came into the turn, smoke or something suddenly appeared from around the engine bay area and out of the back of it, and as we said, Johnny, onto the rear tyres, and that's just, the car's just rotated, it's facing the opposite way, and I think he had absolutely no control. He was a passenger as soon as that, whatever it was, that let go instantly. Lucky that the Audi right behind it was sharp enough reflexes. That was the number 29 car, wasn't it?
It was.
Just to be able to...
So René Rast.
Yeah, René Rast in the Audi sports car. R8. And again, this brings in yet another dimension of this type of racing. I know it sounds really obvious, but something as simple as that happens where you're not really involved, in nothing to do with it, you're doing the right thing, and a car in front, it's not Sprungman's fault. It's pretty clear something mechanical has happened in an instant, which has fired him off. He's missed everything. But if you've done that seconds different and being collected one of the Audi sport cars, and you're involved in it and there's damage, and you've got to get on the radio and say, I've just collected so-and-so, how did that happen? It's not what you want on Thursday of a 24-hour weekend.
No, certainly not.
Well, any time, actually. You don't want it at any point. Maybe the slowing down lap's the only lap to get away with it. It doesn't really matter then.
True. I'm trying to remember who gave us a quote last weekend at Le Mans. It was Richard Bradley or possibly Tom Ferrier, but he spoke about landmines in the race that you've basically got to avoid, and you never know when the next one's going to explode. You don't know which incident you may be partially involved with, definitely involved with, you managed to avoid completely. But René Rast, I mean, a real superstar. It's his normally aspirated V10 you can hear in the background, and we are motoring our way down to the lower part of the circuit at Exmüller, and the bridge over one of the public roads, pretty much. You thunder your way down into the valley at Exmüller, and then the run up towards Bergwerk and Kesselchen afterwards.
You mentioned Richard Bradley there, of course, was in LMP2 last weekend.
That's right, he was.
Funny enough, on the way in this morning, he spoke to me, he phoned me,
Okay.
because he's entered an Aston Martin Owners Club meeting next weekend, driving a 1930s Le Mans Aston Martin. How different can you get? And he'll wear he's full overall still, and boy, can he pedal it. I think both John Hindhaugh and Joe have seen him do that car, but race that car. But it's quite extraordinary. We're talking about 24-hour Nürburgring race, all GT cars after Le Mans. It always follows on this race. Differences of driving different cars. You're talking about drivers going from one in their own team, driving different cars. There's always a setup going to be slightly different. How different can you get from a current LMP2 car, which is basically, let's say, the top category really of endurance racing at the moment, and into a 1930s car that is effectively, think about this, 90 years old?
Yeah, I know.
We say 1930s, it's actually a 1920 car now. It's 100 years old.
Yeah.
If you think that's a 90-year-old technology that was cutting edge at Le Mans in its day.
Yeah.
Works team car.
I mean, cars of the same vintage, but Matthias Besch, who's driven for Rebellion in the past at LMP1 level, has raced in this event in a Renault Clio. So LMP1 to a very, very small hatchback car. But yes, the shift in brain calibration for Richard Bradley is something to behold when you're just 2 weeks apart, 2 weekends apart. So wishing him well for that.
But I think people of his calibre, they just adapt and get on with it. It's just, they'll probably try and go, well, a car's a car, isn't it?
Well, I remember having a similar discussion with Sam Bird as well, who is now an AF Corsa factory driver. But of course, he hadn't raced that Ferrari 488 that he was in last weekend since Le Mans last year, and he's been doing Formula E since then. And yet AF Corsa still employ him to drive their Ferrari incredibly quickly. When you think, well, when was the last time you actually drove this car? But they only need a couple of laps and they're back in the groove again.
But that is absolutely right. It's the indicator of a true professional, isn't it? That they can just do that. And to us mere mortals, it's how do you do that? And it's very similar. I had a good friend years ago who raced at an amateur level, club level, but very successfully. But his day job was a jumbo captain for British Airways. And he bought into the share of a Chipmunk, a RAF trainer, on the basis that he'd get more of the seat time in it because the other people were businessmen, whatever. And then he told this hilarious story of the first time he flew it from Elstree. And he went off and did his bits, whatever, and came back. And when he came back, he said, I couldn't land it. And we all sort of looked, and why not? And he said, well, the ground came up too quickly. And I went, hang on a minute. What do you mean? He said, you've got to remember, I'm in a jumbo, 2 stories up on instruments. He said, I'm in this little thing. He said, and this grass was approaching him. He said, I had to pull back and go around and do a few more circuits and think about it. And he had to retrain his brain to go, okay, the wings are going to bounce, it's going to be bumpy, it's going to move. And it's exactly that sort of thing, as you say. Richard Bradley's going to do it next weekend, jumping from an LMP car that everything, it does what it should do, where you point it, where you go, everything works, to getting into a 1930s Aston Martin. That has got cross-fly tyres and won't go anywhere it wants. It won't do anything in a straight line. But will he enjoy it? You bet he'll enjoy it. And more importantly, will he get a good result out of it? Absolutely guaranteed he'll get a good result of it, because he's a pro. That's what he'll do. Yeah.
I'd imagine being a pilot is one of those occupations where you really don't want that thought, I can't remember how to do the next bit.
Well,
but it'll come back to me.
The same guy always said the definition of a pilot was one that had an equal number of landings as he had takeoffs, which I thought was a great phrase.
You always want that, that ratio to be exactly equal. Audi number 8, number 29, I beg your pardon, in 8th place is René Rast, and he streams across the line. And up ahead of him is a recovery vehicle, an American pickup truck, out on track at the same time as this session being live. And that's something else that you've got to get used to around this place.
It's Mustangs. It's got to be an American pickup truck, hasn't it?
Of course it has.
We've gone to Indianapolis, haven't we?
But yeah, on the really narrow sections of this track, sometimes in the dead of night, there'll be the need for arm code barriers to be repaired, and that's the time when the large lorries, not quite articulated, but more than a 7.5 tonner, is out
far off it,
is out on the track, and the race traffic has to negotiate it. Everything is signposted well. The marshals are out with their code 120s, 120 kph that is, and code 60 boards. Yellow flags, double waved yellows, and there's no real excuse for not knowing what's going on. It's just nothing else quite like this is done in the motorsport world, unless you're in an LLS race or the Nürburgring 24 hours. More evidence of that leaf fall in the grille on the nose of the Abalon-sponsored Porsche from Fricadelli, so that must be the number 30 car of... it's not, I beg your pardon. So Abalon carried on both 30 and 31. I thought that was going to be our big help to tell the two different cars apart, but not this year. So 31 is the fully pro-entered machine, 30 is the Pro-Am, and the cars are no different. It's just purely down to your driver makeup. And there was another car as well in that queue. Oh yeah, one of the Rover Racing BMWs with an awful lot of leaves in the grille too. So the team will be wary of that, and engine temperature feeding their way back up from the Dunlop hairpin and through the really fast sweepers. That initial left and right after the hairpin is so quick, and then you do have to leap on the brakes for the tighter left and right a bit further up the hill. Lights frantically flashing too, and there was a time at Le Mans where one button press would produce 10 flashes automatically. That's not the case in a GT3 car, so you've got to always be warning those behind. Strafing, yes, a good word, yeah, bang on with that. But yeah, to my knowledge, the GT3 cars don't do that, and you have to input the flashes manually. Darting around the outside of one of the... Now, that's either a BMW M2 or one of a number of M240i Racing Cup cars. Sadly, we don't have the 20 plus in that Cup 5 division, and I've often revelled in a fight in Cup 5, which has, well, had something like 10 dicing for the lead, even 4 or 5 hours in. But I make it 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, I think 6, possibly 7 Cup 5 cars for this year's race, and they're all the newer M240i Racing Cup version.
Produced some of the best racing in NLS this year, particularly the Pixum Team Adrenaline Motorsport cars. They've had multiple entries, and they've got 3 cars entered, 3 of those 240i's in this. Cars 242, 241 and 240, unsurprisingly. Quite cleverly done that, wasn't it?
Yeah.
I think even I can see how that works. But yeah, so and again, you know, decent people in those cars as well. I mean, we talk about what we call SP9, the GT3 category, but there's there's backwards, as you said at the top of the show, Johnny, no less than 23 classes in this, and some of the best racing will come from down in that order. We've got all sorts of different things, of course, lower spec Audis and stuff further on down there, your S3s, Bonk Motorsport, Team Sword got in the Rennsport. Pixum, as we mentioned, Team Adrenaline with their 3 M240i versions. Then, of course, don't forget we've got the Caymans. That's six Caymans entered.
That's Cup 3, I think, isn't it?
Correct, that's Cup 3 cars. So the class of Cup 5, the ones that normally, those Cup 5s, the gold one, normally is absolutely extraordinary battling out there. And then, of course, we've got the couple of TCR cars, the 2 Hyundais we mentioned, the Veloster and the 130i. And the last car on the entry list is a Manthey Racing 911. GT3 right at the back there.
But you can strike that one, I'm afraid, because it's not in the entry, and it's a real disappointment for many that would have loved to have seen the Grello car, as it's called, a combination of green and yellow. Which, they don't use the German translation for green and yellow. It's very much anglicised. Although there is another car probably soon to be involved in an NLS or a Nürburgring 24 hours, known as the Rotor car, which is this new crossover between a Porsche Carrera Cup car, so the one without the ABS, and the GT3 car. It sort of sits between a Cup car and a GT3 car. One of them is present on the grid, which is in SP Pro this year. The Black Falcon team Identica entered, and this is the nomenclature they go for: Porsche 911 GT3 Cup MR, MR being for Manthey Racing. Still carries this, it's got a Porsche Cup engine and gearbox, but it has a little bit more aero on it, so they're trying to fill that gap between a Cup car that you see in, for instance, Porsche Super Cup, Porsche Grand Prix, or in the domestic championships, Porsche Carrera Cup Deutschland, Great Britain, France, between that car and then the GT3s that are taking part in SP9 this weekend. So one of those on the grid. But they have produced one that is a combination of red and orange. So they've combined the German word for red, which is rot, and orange and called it a rotor car, Rotor. I'm quite looking forward to seeing that, but it's not here this weekend. Got to wait a little bit longer. We've got Grello and Rotor.
The vagrage of the German language. It's never. It's if in doubt, why create a new word? Just put the two words together.
Pretty much. Yeah.
And you've got a new word.
Yes.
That's it.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's a simple way of doing it. The René Rast car, I think, is going a lot better than the sounds in the background would indicate. That's the car in the pit lane, the sounds, whereas the René Rast machine is threading its way up the hill on the Grand Prix track. It shouldn't be forgotten quite how much gradient change there is on this Grand Prix circuit, by the way. I mean, if you were to walk it, the walk from pit lane and the start-finish line down to the Dunlop hairpin is quite a descent. And then likewise, when you haul your way back up the hill, you're not quite done then when you get back to paddock level on the Grand Prix track, because it plunges downhill once again through the bit curver and that very fast right-hand kink, before then you go through the Vidal chicane and turn left at Hyundai corner, which is technically the last corner on the Grand Prix track, but not one you use onto the Hats and back, which is exactly where the fastest car in the session has just gone. Actually, it's much later on in the lap, beg your pardon, heading up towards Eschbach now and the Kleiner Carousel. And that is Franck Pereira now at the wheel of the Lamborghini Huracan from Conrad Motorsport, but it is a time that was set by Marco Mappelli after he came, well, actually to blows, literally, with Klaus Aberlin in the Fricadelli Porsche. They made a slight bit of contact on the first bit of the Hats and back, but no ill effects being felt by the Lamborghini Huracan. And now through Flansgarten and on towards Schwalbenschwanz rather, goes the turquoise, sort of teal liveried and black Lamborghini that we've become used to in those colours for many years now.
Always reminds me of the Vitaphone Maserati MC12s.
I can see what you're saying.
Every time I see it, first glance, I go, it's not an MC12, is it? It's
Andrea Bertolini.
Correct. Yes, I know. That was something else that when it came along, everybody just went, oh.
Yes.
we thought the 550 Pro drives were something. The Maranellas, when they first came out, they'd learned the 575, and it just moved the bar up. I mean, I remember a team manager at the time just saying at that very first race for 550 Maranello, it's Ferrari o'clock. As in, that was just a summary of that. Suddenly the bar suddenly totally different again.
Hugely,
the MC12 came along and it just stepped into a whole nother bit. It was like a spaceship compared to things like Dodge Vipers at the time. I really am showing my age now. Dodge Viper.
I remember standing at Donington Park watching those Maseratis, and you'd stand at McLean's and literally have both eardrums pierced by that car as it would go through, and love it. I mean, I would fully enjoy the experience.
Yeah, can I get any closer?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So that Lamborghini, that Conrad car, I think they're just basically rotating through their drivers, giving everybody a little bit of track time while the conditions are the same. And again, it's the kind of intel that the team need to collect. They will literally rotate the drivers in those track conditions, look at the data, see it as well. And you can start to see as if they don't know already, but it's always academic to the circuit, ambient temperatures, track conditions, the car, etc. But they'll start to look at it, analyse it now as to what each driver does, have they got a strong point, whatever, to work out how they do start orders, who's going to be in this position, who can take advantage of this or that. And it's all just information gathering all the time. We sit there from the outside and we glibly talk about it, Johnny, it's a 24-hour race and they just go around for a day. But we all know it's the proverbial swan, isn't it? You've got that little bit of serene bit you see above the water underneath. There's an awful lot of work going on, and there's a lot of background to the team, and it is a team sport. We focus easily on the drivers because that's obvious. They're in the car at that time, but to get them to that point, and there's constant information back and forth about do this, do that, and how to drive it, to fuel it, and we said earlier on you can't teach drivers, or drivers don't like being asked to drive slowly. It's not in their nature, but it is part of it. You've got to drive for your team, and we hear it quite often when particularly on a little bit of IndyCar or Formula One, when we get privy to some of the pit-to-car footage of do this, go to that, go to this setting, go to whatever. It's because it's the team result, and at the end of the day, you only get points and the record and the results at one point in the race. That's the checkered flag.
Entirely.
Everything else, your ego can't get in the way. Personalities, driving styles have all got to be accommodated, but you've still got to drive for a team. And that's one of the things I personally love about this type of racing. is that it's so many more layers, so many more dimensions. Yes, the car takes part. The car starts and finishes the race, but you've got 3 or 4 different drivers. You've all got to accommodate and work around, and somebody will have a different style. Somebody will like oversteer, somebody will like understeer. Although I've never ever understood why a driver would like understeer. It's very rare, but some people do, and I've never ever understood that one personally. And I'm not alone on that with a few other people, but some people do. But how people like a car a certain way, how it performs, and you've got to accommodate that, and that's a team manager's job, and it's getting it out there. The car's got to last. It's got to get to the end. Somebody might be hard on gearboxes, somebody might not be, and you can suddenly have something change so fundamentally because you've got a driver that just changes gear in a slightly different way or something, and oh, that doesn't work, or the time's different.
And the other thing you've got to...
Number 7 Audi off in the gravel, unfortunately.
On the Goodyear tyre, which is interesting.
And that's Ortman, Mike David Ortman in the number 24, sorry, the number 7 car, my apologies, off in the gravel. That's now.
Well, that car has already come to grief with a Hyundai, you might remember, earlier on in the session with Patrick Niederhauser at the wheel. Mike David Ortman, it's only 20, silver graded. Yeah, car collection entry, and this is a Pro-Am machine because they also have the Slovakian Miro Konotka due to share that car. And that was actually about to be my point, in that if you're in Pro-Am, you've really got to set up the car so it's comfortable for the lesser experienced driver, and then the more professional ones can adjust to that setup.
100%, that's exactly what you have to do. It's a really, really good call there. And observation, Johnny. That's exactly what you've got to do. It's almost like the army marches to the pace of its slowest man. Yeah. The rest have to do it. We've seen it earlier in the season with some of the Mercedes drives, and just you do have to go. You've got your amateur driver to the best of their ability, and then you've got your pro driver. Well, that's their job, and they should be able to adapt more. But shame to see something rotated in the gravel there. I'm not sure whether it's been tipped or spun around. The Rover BMW coming out of the pits as well. That's going back in. That was out for a little while. The car we were talking about it a bit earlier. But just a shame to see a car off in the gravel there. But no apparent damage. You can't see the other side of it, but it looks like it's okay. So I'm guessing it may well just have rotated under its own steam or lack of steam or something, or locked up and swapped ends. Let's hope there's nothing more severe than that. It is going to be removed as we speak. Obviously, yellow flags for that session. That's not down at the hairpin, is it? That's a bit.
No, it's not. It's
that's
the
where the Mustang
downhill.
went off, is it? Now, just wonder. Well, it's a bit too late now. It is where the Mustang went up, a bit further around the corner, but I couldn't have thought. I just thought for a minute, could there be any fluke? There's been too much of a gap. Too many cars have gone over it since.
I'm never sure I was fully conclusive where the Mustang spun, actually. I was still trying to work that out. Okay, so that's actually the run down the hill. There's also something going on, by the way, on the exit of the Caracciola, the carousel, the proper carousel, which is the really tight left-hander with the inside line being concrete paving slabs. And there's a code 120 set up there into a code 60 with the treble 1 car, it looks like, stopped out on circuit. Treble 1 is an entry from Cup X, which is for the KTM Crossbows. 2 Teichmann Racing entered cars in that division, and it's the treble 1 car of Georg Greisemann, Reinhard Koffler and Mike Ronnefarth who drive that. And the new driver, I didn't think they would be doing the race with just 3, so need to get a first name for Mr. or Herr Volter, but Volter at the wheel and the car going nowhere quickly. What I can't tell you at this stage is whether it's made contact with the Armco barrier or not, but it means that there is currently a slow zone past that scene, no overtaking, and everybody probably being filtered into, well, single file, maybe dual file past there, and then as soon as they get just before act, back to full race speed again.
Yeah, just a little bit of a sight of the number 19 car out on, sorry, the number 11 car out on track at the moment. I'll get it right in a minute, 25, my apologies. 25 car, I'll get the 3 attempts, we got there eventually. I was so busy, actually, I'm trying to get the driver's name. This is one of Bruce's absolute favourites, and this is for Bruce, in case he's listening. We're going to give it a go, but Lorenzo Rocco de Toro Padula.
That's perfect.
And I know Bruce absolutely loves that in his clipped public schoolboy accent. So that's my one attempt, Bruce, if you're listening. Johnny's recorded that for you. We're going to send it to you on a soundbite.
Yeah, no problem.
It's there for you. And of course, I expect the correction of the enunciation to be returned very quickly from Bruce.
I don't think there was any correction needed there at all. You've clearly practiced that all week.
I've heard it a few times because he does. Whenever the car's there, Bruce is like, you can see it comes out. He sort of puffs himself up like Napoleon, and here we go. It's rocker. It's a Lorenzo moment, isn't it?
That was a
Tim knows what I mean.
That was a bit like me last weekend with Vutakorn Intrafuvasak, who was the Thai driver.
I didn't quite get that, sorry.
No, I'm not saying it again. No chance. So
You're wise to me already.
The car collection Audi on the Goodyear Eagles, which is good to see. I'm not sure whether we've had GT3 cars on Goodyears in recent years. Goodyear now very much back as far as the British Touring Car Championship is concerned, and at Le Mans as well. So
of course, because they just bought out Dunlop, haven't they? So it's,
yes.
Goodyear is Dunlop now.
Yeah, it's done from a marketing perspective because the Dunlop franchise around the world, believe it or not, is not the same. So Dunlop in Europe, in Germany, is not the same Dunlop you would find in Australia, whereas Goodyear is definitely a global brand. So the parent company, Goodyear, they've decided to continue on with their very much involvement in sports car racing, but with American brand Goodyear instead, which is a shame for someone born in Birmingham and brought up in the Black Country. The Birmingham brand Dunlop no longer present, but I'm sure that won't be the way of things forever. Just 9 minutes to go.
So you've lost the accent then?
It's still there, mate. Just about.
It's all right, mate.
All right, mate.
Where do you come from?
We've got two commentators on at once here with strong ties from the West Midlands. And you know, at the Nürburgring last year, we had Nick Yellerly from Birmingham, Adam Christodoulou from Lichfield, and me. So we managed to get 3 of us on all at once without anybody noticing, which was a big surprise. Anyway, the helicopter chopper rotor blades in the background indicate that hopefully we'll be able to call the race from a great height through the course of this weekend as well. Only 8.5 minutes left in this session. This was 90 minutes before we started. It has gone very quickly indeed. And I wonder whether the incident out of the carousel can be... Yes, that is the treble one KTM crossbow from Teichmann Racing. So
it just seems to be parked at the side of the track. It hasn't gone off. Doesn't look like there's any damage. The Mustang being recovered now, that's just been taken away. We knew all about that anyway. The 109 Mustang GT, that the so one of the alternative fuel powered cars.
Yeah,
there.
it runs in AT, which is alternative fuel.
They ain't doing any running at the moment because
sadly not.
Sort of something went in that engine, but the KTM just appears to have stopped at the side of the track, and there's no obvious tyre marks or damage or anything, any trail, any evidence of it having gone off. I think it's just I'm guessing, second guessing, we never know until we get the full answer, but maybe a mechanical failure, and it's just parked at the side of the track.
I'm hearing it might be Reinhard Volta in the KTM, one of 2 Teichmann Racing cars, as Michele Beretta now out in the number 5 Phoenix Racing car, running in 2nd place in this first qualifying session of the weekend. Remember, there is no room on the timetable for free practice. We had, well over an hour of free practice last year for the equivalent race. That was run at the end of June. Also, the weekend after the 24 Hours of Le Mans. But it sort of depends on where this race fits in the year. It's normally as close to a German bank holiday as possible. Sometimes Ascension Day, sometimes other days as well. A very impressive livery for the Hella Padgett Ferrari. This is another 488 with the turbocharged engine, hence the very large intakes just in front of the rear wheel arches. And car 16, Hella Padgett Racing 1 for Christian Kohlhaas, Nikolai Rogivu, Stefan Kohler. And I'm unsure as to a 4th driver there, but there will be one. It's just there wasn't one on an initial entry list. But that being an SP9 Pro-Am car, that is eligible to take part in top qualifying 1 tomorrow. And haven't fully explained the qualifying for tomorrow night, but basically it's a session for 17 cars, 18 cars I think it is, gunning for the top 4 positions. And if you finish in the top 4 in top qualifying 1, that ensures your entry into qualifying 2, where there are just 4 places up for grabs alongside 13 cars that have already cemented their place. So we'll have 17 cars in top qualifying 2 tomorrow afternoon/evening. Beautiful conditions right now at the Nürburgring, both on the Grand Prix circuit and the Nordschleife. The Eifel mountains in the distance make this a picture postcard day. Just a question of how long we can hang on to this good weather, because it's the Nürburgring and there's always going to be a little bit of rain, you would think, during the race. But we were saying that Le Mans was going to be held in near biblical conditions. Actually, the rain never arrived last weekend. The forecast got where the rain was just pushed further and further back, and eventually it rained Sunday night, I think, and completely missed the race itself. So could we be in a similar situation in Germany? 5 minutes to go. Axel Jeffries takes charge of the 21 Lamborghini Huracan that tops the times. Nearly 4 seconds is the gap from the Phoenix Racing Audi. Jules Gounon setting the time, but now Michele Beretta is at the wheel with Adam Christodoulou mentioning the Midlanders. He now gets into the Mercedes number 4 of HRT, and that car is currently in 3rd position ahead of Newman to KCMG, Jörg Bergmeister getting a very late call-up indeed, and Dries Vanthoor, the younger brother of Laurens. Laurens not permitted to be, well actually, Laurens Vanthoor wasn't at Le Mans, was he? But I don't think, I'm not sure that Laurens is on site though, for the same reasons. Got me thinking now whether Laurens was at Le Mans, but he is a regular, of course, in the US arm of the Porsches, GTE. And we didn't have any of the USA version of the 911 RSRs at Le Mans this year, purely from a logistical point of view. Likewise, Corvette didn't travel. But Dries Vanthoor is there, and he managed to take victory in last year's race, along with fellow Belgian Fred Vervisch, Nico Müller, the Swiss, and Frank Stippler.
Just talking the Ferraris there, Johnny, I've not noticed my favourite, the Octane Ferrari, not being out on track in this session at all.
Okay, that's interesting.
Yeah, just wanted to make, because it's a very, very similar colour scheme to the one you've just been highlighting.
The two-tone blue.
Yeah, the number 16 car. This is the Hella Paget car, Racing 1, and of course the other one being the all-Swiss entry, number 26, Octane 126, normally pedalled in this race for Bjorn Grossman, Simon Trummer, Jonathan Hershey, and Luca Ludwig, who've had some stellar performances in that car, including a near win in the 6 hour. But didn't quite make it on the fuel at the end, but certainly a race win in round 2, but then formally disqualified afterwards because of that tyre regularity on the left rear, which is a shame, but a front-running car. So not seeing that out. It's a Swiss entry, so we'll keep an eye on to why that hasn't appeared. I can't see it anywhere yet.
Well, I've got an Octane 126 Ferrari in 90th position with Grossman, but I'm not even sure he's completed the lap that he was on. And that took him 21 minutes, so it is concerning whether it's been out or not. It's even more concerning if it's been out for a lap and not completed it, because it's stuck out in the countryside somewhere. So mildly concerning, but we will try and investigate that between now and the end of the day. The 704 Scuderia Cameron Glickenhaus SCG 004. Now Glickenhaus, of course, famously going to get involved with the World Endurance Championship next year in the hypercar era. And Jim Glickenhaus, who is a wonderful character, has had one of his cars on pole position in this event in the past, but never managed to get the win. Is there an opportunity with the 704 machine this year? Is eligible for top qualifying, runs his car 704, but not in SP9. It's an SPX car because it's not strictly a GT3 machine.
Well, hoping for a better run in the 24-hour than they had in the 6-hour a few weeks ago, where it had a huge fire issue in qualifying, then they rebuilt it and got the car out, and they just, I think they just had the amount of damage done from a fire. There's always going to be collateral damage. They did an extraordinary job to get the car into the race, but being pedalled by no less than Richard Westbrook at the moment.
Yes.
A man of, to us Brits, of Porsche fame, really.
Yes.
Amongst other things, but that's how I
was racing with Aston Martin last weekend, and they bagged themselves a podium and sealed the Manufacturers' Championship with Nicky Thiem and Marco Sorensen. But yeah, I mean, you think about the cars that Richard Westbrook has raced through the years. Porsche, and I remember the days when he was in the Carrera Cup GB with Damien Faulkner and all the others. Tim Harvey. He has raced...
Turned commentator now.
Early
Seen the light,
2000s.
Tim Harvey.
Yes, indeed. Yeah. Is he a better commentator than driver? Questionable.
Oh,
I know Tim. So
I'll ask him next time I see him. Yeah.
But Westbrook, long time with Corvette, so knowledge of front engine cars. Now with Aston, racing an Audi in this race and the Glickenhaus. I mean, think about the number of race overalls he must have back at base in,
Well, at least
in
both
London.
cars he's racing a mid-engine in this one, so you're not going
That's
from the
true.
front to a rear, so not too much to adapt for the old brain there for him. But yeah, you take part in the Nürburgring 24-hour race and you're not content with doing that. You've got to drive 2 different cars in it.
Yeah.
That's just greedy, isn't it?
It is a little bit, yeah. So let's just make sure you're aware of the car that Westy is in for the Audi perspective. It's the 14 Phoenix racing car. Mike Rockenfeller joining him in that. But as you say, he's also in the driving lineup for Jim Glickenhaus's team in the SCG. The clock has disappeared in the corner of our screen, and that means that time is up. But if you are on a lap, you've started a quick one, you will be allowed to finish it. So that's what I mean about potentially this session running on for another 8 minutes or so. One of the first cars to cross the line is a BMW M240i Racing Cup car. And much discussion down at Mercedes. I heard Adam Christodoulou having a chat with Maro Engel and his other teammates, Lucas Stoltz and Manuel Metzger, about the Code 120 that was out just after the carousel proper. So no opportunity to push for a really quick lap. Also, the guys at Car Collection in deep discussion as well. Mirko Bortolotti, who spends an awful lot of time in Germany these days, but is Italian by birth. And Mirko, a superstar when it comes to driving Audis quickly these days, but it used to be Lamborghinis not too long ago, of course. So the times show that Marco Mappelli, by the looks of things, is going to be quickest in qualifying 1. Remember, if you're racing in an SP9 Pro or Pro-Am car, then these times are sort of irrelevant, because what you're looking to do is get into top qualifying tomorrow night. René Rast with the Audi Sport mask on, sitting back in one of a number of Audi Sport garages this weekend, reclining. He has had an entertaining couple of laps behind the wheel of the Lance Motorsport car. He's now handed that over to Chris Mees, who is motoring on between the 2 red and white curbs. Relatively clear road in front of Chris Mees right now. Same cannot be said, though, for Axel Jeffries, who has got, looks like a BMW from Rover Racing for company, as they helter-skelter their way down the hill towards Exmuller. Actually, that might be the climb up the other side now, and on their way towards the carousel, part way up the hill. Really fast section of circuit between Exmuller and the right-hander at Bergwerk, but then you put the right foot down, and it's really just a kind of lift and coast situation between Kesselchen, Klostertal, before hard braking as you approach the Caracciolo carousel. And the next question for me is, Teichmann Racing's KTM, is it still sitting on the track, or is there a clear road in front? I reckon that's been cleared now, actually, that little KTM crossbow. And yes, the opportunity to pick up the pace and head through the right-handers. I noticed that the positional numbers as you look at the car, top left-hand corner of the windscreen, flashing and blue. That's normally to indicate that it's one of the quick cars wanting to get by. The blue positional lights are normally assigned just before top qualifying. If you've made it into the top 30, you get one of those so wanted blue flashing lights, and to those in front, they see a flashing blue number, they know it's one of the quick cars wanting to get through. I suppose they can already be assigned, though, because we know who's going to be in top qualifying tomorrow. Just a question of which order they'll be in. As Axel Jeffries thought about going 2 abreast there with the BMW. The problem was they were also overtaking a little Porsche Cayman at Brunchen. Probably better to stay in single file there.
I did take an intake of breath from it there. I think you did the same while I was watching.
Yeah.
It was like I'm not sure you might want to do that, Axel, and he didn't. He had a look and then thought better of it, didn't he? So
you do not want to lose a corner on the car on effectively the slowing down lap of the. Well, we are still, I realise, competing for times. But we have got 2 more sessions of qualifying to come, of standard qualifying, and then the shootout. So there's plenty of mileage yet before we even get to warm up on Saturday morning.
we're only Thursday lunchtime.
I know.
2 days away. Yeah.
Yeah.
But it is the Conrad Motorsport car. So Axel Jeffries currently in that car. The driver's been cycled through that, and the twitch coming out of the carousel there for that car, just exactly as I commented. I think that didn't look a great deal. I'm just trying to relay what's happened there. It didn't look a great deal, but I bet in car, if there were an in-car shot at the time, I bet there was a lot of correction going on to catch that. That was more than just a little twitch. That was that will have got his attention, to say the very least.
The awkward moment where your car's straddling the concrete and the tarmac there, and there's quite an angle change, a camber change between how the slabs have been laid and then the shallower asphalt at the higher bit. So very easy to have a moment coming out of there. If you line up the carousel and the Kleiner carousel later on in the lap, I mean, it can be perfect. It's sort of popping you out, spitting you out of the corner and giving you that forward momentum, but it's also really easy to get that part of the circuit wrong.
It's about being precise, and that's exactly it. As you say, the entry to it and all the way through it is easy. As you say, it's that bit, that camber change, when it suddenly comes out, and it says, as you said, it either pops you out to a good lap or it spits you off, or it spits you into an error, and that's the problem. And it can be a matter of centimetres different to do that. Certainly in these big GT cars, and you've got to be a little bit careful. They're still, I think they've just started. Are they starting another lap?
They will have got the checkered flag that time by, so they will. What they will do is go round. Another big wiggle from Jeffries. Not the thing to be doing now that you really are competing for a lap time, because this will just be a slowing down lap of the Grand Prix circuit.
That's why I asked you the question, Johnny, because the pace of them didn't look to me as if they were on a slowing down lap. And
no,
that's exactly why I asked. Are you sure? Because it looks like there's still a little bit of a. Rivalry, shall we say, for want of a better word, going on between these two at the moment. And exactly as you said there, why would you want to do that on a slowing down lap? It's discretion, better part of valour, and all that. And just back out of it, boys. It's 2 days before the race starts.
Yeah.
2 days from now, the race won't have started. 48 hours from now, it won't have started yet.
That's very true.
That's where we are.
We're still a couple of hours out from the Saturday afternoon start. Damage on a Cayman, and I'm not sure that's the same one from earlier on.
Yeah,
I
I think it's the very same one. The first bit of non-track action, off-track action we saw. I think that's the same car.
Okay, could well be.
Well, let's hope there's two in the same team. Then let's just keep it to one incident, shall we?
All right.
Yeah.
So, in the shadow of the Nürburgring Castle, it is Axel Jeffries who takes first bragging rights of the weekend by topping qualifying one, effectively what was free practice for the equivalent event last year. An 8:11.428. He is 3.9 seconds quicker than the number 5 Phoenix Racing Audi. So it's a Lamborghini Huracan who tops the times. Jules Gounon set the time in the number 5 Phoenix Racing Audi, although Michele Beretta did quite a bit of number of laps after that. 4th position for Adam Christodoulou's Mercedes, and I probably think it was Adam who set the time. Maro Engel, not sure he even got into the number 4 at any point there, but we can check on that later on. The KCMG Porsche of Earl Bamber, Dennis Olsen, Timo Bernhard and Jörg Bergmeister finished the session in 4th position, ahead of the number 1 car of Dries van Tor, Frederik Vervies, Nico Muller and Frank Stippler, another entry from the Phoenix Racing gang. 6th position for the number 3 Audi of Mirko Bortolotti, Robin Freins, Chris Haase and Marcus Winkelhock. And then the 22 and the 29 cars, they are a Mercedes and an Audi respectively from 10Q Racing, and the Audi Sport Team car from Lant Motorsport, number 29. Renaud Rast did a number of laps in that session, and Christopher Mies finished things off. 9th position to the number 2 Mercedes HRT entry, Philip Ellis, the last to be at the wheel of that. And Jordan Pepper got some time in the 101 car, which is the Valkenhorst BMW M6 he shares with Mikkel Jensen, David Pittard and Christian Cronjes. And I'm wondering whether I might be able to whip through some of the cars that topped the classes. SPX sort of lumped in with SP9. It's a one-car class, but 24th position for the Scuderia Cameron Glickenhaus 004. SP8T was topped by the Valkenhorst BMW M4 GT4. That's obviously had something done to it, which means it can't run in SP10, which is the kosher GT4 category. 1 or 2 extra bits of aero, quite possibly, or a change to the ECU, and it runs in SP8T instead, as does the sister car from Valkenhorst that finished second in the class. Cup X was topped by the Treble 11, despite it having dramas in the session and slowing down just after the carousel. 111 does finish the best. In Cup 3, it is Steve Brooks. Yes, that's Steve Brooks, who featured at Le Mans last year. One or two journalists and websites uncovering the fact that that is actually Philippe Hazerbrook, who's been to Le Mans a number of times and I think has raced in this event as well, but now known as Steve Brooks, car 301. And in SP10, it's the 37 Toyota Supra, the new 2020 spec GR Supra GT4 from Novell Racing with its Toyo tyres, and Turbo Asahi setting the best time in that, which was a 9 minutes 54. Right, qualifying 1 done. What more do we know now, Peter Snowden, than we perhaps didn't know at the start of the session? I suppose it's
the Lamborghini's quicker than I thought it would be.
Yeah, I agree. Didn't expect it to be up there.
Yeah, not discrediting it, but I thought top 10, no question, no brainer. Top 5, possibly. So 5, 6, 7 thereabout. I just didn't think they'd be topping it straight away, and that comes back to what I said. It's almost academic. It's not that important, but it is for the bracket. It's the first timed session of the weekend.
Yeah,
and they've gone over it. And what it does is, whether it matters or not, it gives everybody a bit of a fillip in that team of, we're at the top. We've just done the first session, our car's at the top. It's great to see. We will see what else goes on. I'm still intrigued to see what our times are. Axel Jeffries, as you say, we just noticed on that last lap where there was a couple of real sort of twitches with that car, which was slightly odd. One on the carousel, you were saying quite rightly, compared to the carousel, the contour, understandable. But a bit further around the lap, it had a moment where shouldn't really have had a moment, and I wouldn't have thought Axel Jeffries was overdriving it. I am trying to put the driver out of the equation. So what is it? What's causing it to do that?
Unless it's so on the ragged edge in order to get that time. I mean, it's 4 seconds quicker than anybody else, but I don't think many other cars were really pushing. They might well have just been using that session literally as free practice. It's qualifying 1 by title, but I think,
I tend to agree. Yeah.
Nobody wants to go all out in the first session. So we will see the times dip, no doubt about it. And don't forget that there is another lengthy session build